My intervention will have some good news and some bad news. And the focus is going to be about how Europe is doing in diversifying its supplies of natural gas away from Russia to remove, as Ambassador Tsuni so powerfully put it, the Gazprom boot from Europe's and Greece's neck. So on the positive side, when I first met now Minister Skylakakis, we were recognizing problems that existed, economic problems on the bilateral US-Greek agenda. We had a very pragmatic approach. You were amazingly pragmatic and focused on details and the strategy. But back then, in around 2007, there was nowhere near a consensus in Europe for what we've heard consistently about natural gas today, about the need to diversify supply, especially here in Greece, where for political and other economic reasons, Russian suppliers or Russian-affiliated suppliers had special relationships with private companies that had media outlets that really skewed the perspective. That's finished. And so now where we are is where there has been great work by the European Union and member states in achieving much more connectivity on natural gas interconnections. It took a while. Back in 2006, when Russia first instrumentalized or weaponized natural gas supplies by cutting off the supplies to Ukraine and therefore Bulgaria and the rest of the EU, a lot of the US's NATO allies were uncomfortable in competing with Russia and thought maybe we should just quietly let Russia, like Germany would say, be a reliable supplier. We in Washington had had a different perspective for about 8 years by then. We had been working with our friends and allies, so with the governments of Azerbaijan, Georgia, and Turkey, and companies, primarily BP and the state oil company of Azerbaijan Republic, to help them, the investors, the oil companies, and the governments, achieve a network of oil and gas pipelines from the Caspian Sea that would provide diversified supplies, not only to Georgia and Turkey, but eventually to the European Union. For a while, when we would try to persuade our EU allies that it made sense to embrace these projects and then start pulling together Europe's own regional interconnections, we were often met with a response of, well, thank you very much for your interest in European geoeconomic policy. Now, please go home. But that began to shift, really, of course, in 2014 with Russia's first invasion of Ukraine, and then, of course, after the full-scale invasion in 2022. So Europe moved with great speed, especially Germany, that had been most resistant to confronting Gazprom and Russia. Germany moved to put in place regasification terminals for liquid natural gas that then gave Germany and the northern parts of Europe, along with Poland that has similar capabilities, and Lithuania, access to global supplies of LNG, which fortunately now are traded in a liquid way, both on the spot prices and then with longer-term contracts. So you don't have those distortions that the minister was talking about in Europe's electricity markets in gas to that extent. So that's a really good news story. There's the strategic awareness now of the need to diversify supplies. There's a strategic awareness of the threat posed by Russia by design, by weaponizing or instrumentalizing supplies of natural gas. And Europe has done, I think, a pretty good job in building the interconnections, though, of course, more are needed. So what's the bad news? The bad news is I don't think that Azerbaijan is going to be able to meet its target under its strategic energy partnership agreement with the EU of doubling supplies of Azerbaijani gas into the EU by 2027. That's for a few reasons. One, there's not enough investment going into Azerbaijan's upstream to produce those volumes. And that's because the signals being sent by the European Union are contradictory. On the one hand, there's a desire to double these supplies into the EU. On the other hand, there's a desire to phase out natural gas as quickly as possible. That makes it really difficult to finance new infrastructure because the people with the money are saying, well, wait a second, if the European Union isn't going to keep on buying natural gas, let's say during the 30-year lifespan of this project, I may not get repaid, so I don't think I want to invest upstream in Azerbaijan or midstream or in the pipelines, for example, the expansion of the Trans-Adriatic pipeline, something the US strongly supported, by the way, for years. To double the supply of Azerbaijani gas, were it available, into the EU, the capacity of the pipeline carrying that gas into the EU space, so to Greece, and then under the Adriatic to Italy, must double. My understanding is to expand that current 10 billion cubic meter connection by 1 billion cubic meter, so from 10 to 11, or from 11 to 12 actually, there's about $200 million in investment that's needed. That's doable. To expand though by another, let's say 2.5 billion cubic meters, that's a much more expensive investment. You need about 800 million euros because you need to add compression stations and ones that run on electricity rather than natural gas, which is a much more expensive new generation of compressors. So I'm pessimistic about it being possible to reach that doubling of the capacity and the volume of gas from Azerbaijan to the EU. But the good news is the vertical corridor, as we've been talking about. There's a great opportunity, obviously, for Greece and Bulgaria, Romania, Moldova, and beyond to bring in LNG, not only to Alexandroupoli and elsewhere in Greece, but maybe even from Turkey. But my last point is there's a big problem in the monopolization of gas transit between Turkey's state-owned company and the Bulgarian one. And we'll talk about this more, but the one more issue to put on the table for the question period is the Bulgarian energy system and natural gas system is still it's dominated by state monopoly, which leads to inefficiencies, non-transparency, lots of influence by Russia, and too much dependence on coal. And so as long as there's this monopoly-to-monopoly relationship between Turkey and Bulgaria, the ability of Turkey to contribute to the diversification of supply via liquid natural gas will be limited. And that sets, inside the Bulgarian system, that lack of reform really sets a negative example for the Western Balkan states that we all hope will soon join the EU. Thank you.